Okay, welcome everybody, and this is obviously today's NHS North Cumbria Clinical Commissioning Group Governing Body meeting. I just wanted to say before we started the actual meeting proper, I just thought it was appropriate for us just to have a few moments of reflection for us, because this is our first public meeting since sadly we lost Chris Buckingham a few weeks ago, and Chris's funeral was last Friday in Carlisle. But I know there's been a number of events that have been held for CCG staff to obviously try and remember Chris and what he did for our organisation. But I just wanted to maybe just give a few moments of reflection for us just to have a bit of a time to think about it, and then I'll start the meeting proper if that's okay. Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks for taking the time to do that. Really appreciate it. Just in terms of today's meeting, we didn't have one in January. We actually deferred it from January to today. The reason why we didn't have the normal 2-monthly governing body meeting in public was because we're in the middle very much then of a real difficult time in North Cumbria, particularly around the hospital. But also wider services as well as social care and across the region. So we decided to defer the meeting. We did have a development session, but this is the sort of first public our meeting in public that we've had for 3 months. So it's just to explain the reasons for that, so everyone is aware, and we can note it down in the minutes as well. We do have a number of apologies, just in terms of members of the governing body itself. We have Gareth Coakley, who's one of our GP leads, and Peter Rooney, who's the Chief Operating Officer, and also as well as an attendee, Peter Scott from the North Cumbria Integrated Care, who's the chair there, with the reciprocal arrangement they have that I attend the trust board and Peter attends this. We have apologies from Peter as well. And also from an attendee who would normally be here, but our head of communications, Julie Clayton, can't make it. I don't think I see anybody else, but I just wanted to check. I've not seen Helen appear. So
yeah, I'm here, John.
Oh, sorry, Helen. Thank you. Sorry, I do apologise, Helen. Right, so no apologies from you then, Helen. So thank you for that. And obviously, it is a meeting in public, so we're very grateful that Liz could spend some time and join us today. So I really appreciate that, Liz. It's vitally important that we do connect with our community. And you being here, I know that you'll ask some useful questions for us. As it is a meeting in public, those questions are usually held towards the end. But I just wanted to check, Brenda, did you actually get any questions written down that we sometimes get sent in by email or not, so that I can deal with those then? But I don't think we have any. Yeah, no, that's okay.
12:30 today. I'll double check my iPad while we're on.
Okay. No, thanks very much for that. So then just in terms of where we go, we've got declarations of interest. So just regarding members of the governing body, and I always particularly maybe look at GPs in this, because they're the ones who tend to have the more conflicts of interest potentially for any of our members. Is there anything on the agenda from anybody at all for this part 1 meeting that people want to raise specifically? Okay, I don't think that I'm trying to think of any, and I can't think of any, I have to say, so that's okay. So there's no problems with that then. Just in terms of approval of the minutes, as I say, the last meeting was in November. So what I wanted to do, just going through them for accuracy, if people want to shout up as I go slowly through page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yes, John.
Okay, page 8. Go ahead, Carol.
At the bottom of page 8, the paragraph that starts CW confirmed that NCIC had identified that referral to treatments was a significant issue. I presume that is referral to treatment waiting times, and I'm not clear whether Charles was referring to cancer waits specifically, or all of referral to treatment waits at that point in the meeting. So it possibly needs 2 clarifications.
Okay, I think it's probably that specific. It might not be recalled by anybody, but Charles, you've got your hand up.
It was a long time ago, but certainly the issue about is referral to treatment waiting times, and that was experienced across a number of areas and conditions, not just cancer wait. So it refers to all. Okay. So hopefully that clarifies things. Thanks, Charles. And so Brenda, then it should read that NCIC had identified that referral to treatment waiting times, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, thanks for that, Carol. 9 and 10. Are we okay? There are some questions there from members of the public, which obviously people asked either in person or by way of email, which we put the answers on there for those. And Liz, were you okay with your answers to your questions? I will bring you in here. You okay with that? You've got those? Yeah. Oh, you can't hear me. Okay, Liz. Right. And then there was the attachment. The reason why I'm pausing here is because I'm scrolling down on my other computer, so I can't get to these things quickly with one hand. So there was the presentation that was attached there that Gareth did for us in terms of his role and some of the issues, and they're available publicly as well. And I think some people asked specifically for those, so I'm glad that we put them out there. So I'm on to, I think there's just a short action log when I get to the bottom of here. He says, scrolling up, it was a long presentation. Here we go. I didn't think it was that long though. Okay, the action log. I'm here now. Okay, just all those top 2 have been done. The information technology one. It says there that Gareth was going to discuss with AB and JC the concerns and ideas outlined in the governing body minutes of this meeting. It says completed, but I don't see any kind of markup. I don't know, Brenda, if you got anything at all from anybody or.
Yeah, Gareth came back to me and said it is completed. There is always ongoing discussions. However, that specific action was completed.
Okay, and then the other one, it's got a green box for it for the minutes and action logs from part 2. This was about providing emotional wellbeing and psychological support offers to all staff across the health and social care system. So I think there's a Louise and Peter there and Suzanne. Again, you're the only one here, Louise. Is that being done?
Yeah, I would say in the context of that particular meeting, John, it was completed. Some of it related to support that NCIC were looking for, which I think we'd sort of reported was taken up in terms of financial support through the LRF route. But obviously, just reflecting in view of the circumstances around Chris's death, we've clearly had a review and provided ongoing support generally. So I would say that for all those reasons, that action is now complete. John, thank you. Okay, no, thank you very much. And again, Louise, I just want to place on record, in particular, your leadership around support for staff in relation to Chris's death, and thank you so much for what you've done in very difficult circumstances. Okay, I'm on to the Chair and the Council Officers report. Mark, you're going to take us through this. If there's anything that I'll join in, I will do, but it's fairly straightforward, so you just might want to pick a few things out and then maybe we go to questions and or comments, if that's okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here, aren't I? I do apologise. No, I'm sorry, Mark. The reason why is I scrolled down onto my thing and I didn't look at my agenda when I did so my fault. You're going to give us the update for COVID in relation to the current position of vaccination. My apologies. That's right. Sorry. Lovely. Thank you. Okay, I was scared you there, didn't I?
So I was going to recover. It's fine. So the first thing to say is, and we continue to say this, our thanks from me personally as an organisation to everything that everybody continues to do through the crisis. It has been and continues to be a fantastic effort to get us through this crisis. So thank you. And that's for everybody in every way, because everybody is contributing to our fight against this challenge. Where we are at the moment, we continue to be very busy. Bearing in mind, we didn't have a meeting in January, for the last couple of months, going through this this current phase of the infection has been very, very busy, and has been much busier than the first wave of the infection. Lots of different reasons for that, not least different variants, etc. Thankfully, we're seeing the infection rates in the communities falling quite rapidly. Obviously, we keep a very close eye on that with our public health colleagues, Colin and Claire, but that continues to go in the right direction. But whilst that goes in the right direction, we also know there is a lag between that and how our work in the NHS follows that, and there are always a number of weeks between those infection rates coming down and the COVID positive patients in our system coming down as well. But we are also seeing that starting to come down as well. I think over the past couple of months, we've had to deal with numbers of COVID positive patients in excess of the first phase. In particular, lots of issues around patients that have required ITU and critical care, and colleagues will have no doubt seen our Foundation Trust colleagues from across our ICS on the news and the television at various points in time, talking about just how busy the hospitals are and how busy the ITUs have been as well. However, the whole of the system is busy and remains busy. Colleagues in primary care are dealing with all of their normal workload. They are dealing with COVID positive patients in the community. They are dealing with COVID positive patients in the care homes. Our care home colleagues are dealing with everything around that as well, including sickness of staff, etc. And whilst we're doing all of those things, we're also we've also got the biggest mass vaccination program the country has ever seen being delivered, primarily for us in North Cumbria from primary care, in conjunction with the hub that's been in NCIC in the hospital as well. So it has been an extremely busy time, and we are still in a very busy period. That said, we do have an eye to the future, and there are discussions going on about what does recovery look like, what does starting to put back in place more of our normal operations look like in hospitals, what does general recovery look like in terms of the backlogs of care that people need, that have built up through this crisis. We're also we have an eye to the future in terms of things like winter planning as well. I know we are sitting here today in February, but also we want to make sure that we are capturing lessons learnt and understanding as we go into next year and winter next year, how we can capitalize on all of the things that we've learnt this year in order to take into the processes for the following year as well. I think that's probably where I'll leave that, John, but I'm very happy to answer any questions. John, you're on mute.
Are there any questions from anybody at all? I know we're going to move on to the vaccination process, but anything from that? No? Okay. Are you going to pass over to Ed now then, Mark? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So rollout of the COVID vaccination programme is going great guns. You'll know that we've got the 9 sites plus the 2 hospital sites. Towards the end of March, we will also be getting a mass vaccination site based in Penrith. And we are also in discussions with the region at the moment about an additional 1 or 2 mass vaccination sites as well in the west of the county and in the north part of the county as well. So those discussions are ongoing. Pharmacies, as of today, have been called up to see if high street pharmacies want to be part of this process. And that's in addition to 2 large pharmacy sites that we've got applications in for, one in Carlisle and one in Workington. The percentages of people who are vaccinated are still really high. We've now completed cohorts 1 to 4. And so this week, we've started vaccinating cohort 5, which are the over 65s. and cohort 6, which are the 16 to 64-year-olds with underlying health conditions. And we're working really closely with our secondary care partners, local authority, third sector, to make sure that we have a handle on who are the priority subgroups within those cohorts. So that's a lot of work that's ongoing at the moment. So we're still dependent hugely upon supply, and we're informed regionally that supply from mid-March is really, the doors are going to open up, and there's going to be a lot more supply from mid-March going forwards. So that's probably the oversight of where it's going. Really, there's lots of operational things that we're dealing with on a daily basis, but the programme's going particularly well in North Cumbria.
Okay, thank you very much, Ed. Any questions or comments from anybody, please?
There is something in the comments, John.
All right, okay, I've not picked those up. So, oh, so we have, right, so that's from Eileen, but Eileen's a member of the public, so I'll pick that up. But I just wondered, right, I mean, I think you discussed in your where practices are actually carrying out those vaccinations. It's at Flat Walks in Copeland rather than GP surgeries. So basically, could you explain? It's just around PCN, isn't it? Yeah.
So each group of practices come together in a primary care network. So some PCNs might have 10 practices, some might just have 1 practice, but it's a bringing together of the GP practices, and each of those primary care networks were asked to set up their own vaccination sites on behalf of those practices. So that's what we initially did. Some of those practices that are probably more rural, now that we have AZ online, the AstraZeneca vaccine, that's much more. Sorry, I can hear somebody's better. So the AZ is now able to be transported from those main vaccination sites to smaller practices. So great example is moving vaccine from Penrith to Alston as one example. So that's something that's come online in the last few weeks, that we've got a vaccine now that we can shift around, which means that as well as vaccinating in the primary care centres, we're able to move some of that vaccine to individual practices where needed.
May I just say?
Sorry, Eileen. It's a meeting in public, Eileen. It's not a public meeting, so there'll be some questions later on. I do apologise. You missed the start of the meeting, unfortunately, where we explained the situation. So if you just bear that in mind, please. But I'll bring you in at the very end. Deb, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, Ed, I wondered. One of the things that's come up quite a lot is people who are carers to the vulnerable, and I wondered if we could try and influence whoever decrees the groups that carers could be included, because there's a lot of fear and anxiety for carers that if they're not immunised, they might well bring it in, and also some people who are perhaps more vulnerable from the work that they do. And I'm thinking particularly of funeral directors, where I think there's a lot of anxiety and they've had an awful January. You know, if you're talking about the pressure on the hospital, the pressure on the funeral directors has been massive as well. And it's just a way of sort of reducing anxiety in some of these groups.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, so I think, Deb, you've touched on 2 groups. There's probably 22 or 222 subgroups of the cohorts that we have been working through. So unpaid carers, as you say, it's not as easy as it sounds in terms of, you know, if you're in a household that's got 6 members in it with 1 person who needs to be cared for, you probably then need to vaccinate all 7 within that household. So we're just trying to work through it with local authority partners. And obviously some people are registered as carers with local authority and with their GP practices, but we know that there are a lot of people that are not registered as well. So there has been a national webinar today talking about just carers, paid and unpaid, and we're hoping that there's an operational policy that's going to be out very, very soon to give more guidance about some of those subgroups. So yeah, they're very much on the radar, and we are working with those subsets as well as probably lots of other subsets to identify as well.
That's great. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, I just want to say, Ed, on behalf of everybody, thanks so much for what you're doing in partnership with, I know, lots of different people, but you're leading on that for us in terms of North Cumbria, and I know you've done a lot of work into that in terms of the links into the North East and also the links here locally. And it's not an easy task, but the fact that they're being delivered in the way that they're being delivered and the rate that they're being delivered is amazing, and it isn't easy as well when things get chopped and changed around. Does that seem to be getting a little bit easier now, Ed, in terms of that, or are we still in that kind of model where you'll only get so many that many vaccinations that we tell you you're going to get? Is that getting a bit better?
So we're still on what they call the push model, in terms of we get what we're given from the region and nationally. Some of that depends on the production and manufacture and checking of those vaccines, which does cause a little bit of variation in the system. Hence, for the next 2 weeks, there's probably going to be a little bit less vaccination, but then from mid-March, the doors will open up and there'll be a lot more consistent approach. So it's I think we're in a much stronger position than we were a month ago. It's still, there are still daily issues that we deal with, but I think that certainly from a vaccination point of view, our colleagues who are vaccinating and through their centres and their local sites have really got some nice, slick, high quality processes, and that's evidenced by quite a lot of feedback I get from people who have had a really, really good experience receiving their vaccination. So it's getting better, definitely.
Okay, thanks for that, Ed. And again, just to note as well, apart from yourselves and the clinical side of things and the organisation side of things, the amount of volunteers that we've had supporting the actual process itself and at the various sites and helping people to gain access and entry. So that's really good. It's really good. Okay, Deb, you've got your hand up again. Sorry, I was going to.
Yeah, sorry, it's something else. Just hot off the press from the Cumbria Population Mental Health and Wellbeing Partnership, that then the updated leaflet that went out at the beginning of the pandemic about looking after your mental health is going to be inserted and given out with vaccinations as a way of reaching everybody.
Okay, that's useful information. Denise, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, Ed, what do you think the impact of second vaccinations will be on the sort of rollout of first vaccinations?
In terms of what, timescales or logistics?
Is it going to slow the rollout of first ones down? Because obviously you've got all the second ones coming on, or is that something what Penrith Mass Vaccination Centre will do? I'm not sure how it's going to work.
So the push to get even more channels vaccinating is definitely where we are at the moment. Hence, mass sites, big pharmacy sites, high street pharmacies. We're talking about roving models. So there are going to be more channels coming online, and added to that, what we're being told that vaccine supply is going to increase. I'm not expecting there to be any issue about rolling out first vaccinations.
Okay, John, it might, I'll talk with Julie when she's back, but it might be worth some comms on that, because I was at a group last week and they're getting worried that first vaccinations are going to be a longer down the line because of seconds. So if all those things that Ed said, it might be worth getting some comms out.
Okay, you have a quick chat with Julie. Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. I'll link in with that as well. John?
Thanks, John. Ed, it was just about the take-up of vaccines and people turning up. I've heard in other areas that there's been some slowness of take-up, particularly of some staff in care homes. Is there anything like that in North Cumbria?
No, so take-ups on the whole has been really, really high, and probably higher than we expected. That there are individuals who refuse the vaccination for lots of different reasons, and I'm hearing nationally that there are certain groups of people as well, and from certain backgrounds, who are refusing it, are based on lots of different perceptions. And I think what the government and ourselves are trying to do is put out as many messages as we can to overcome some of those negative perceptions of what the vaccination might mean. And so we are working hard from a comms point of view to say everybody should be taking up their vaccine, because it is for the benefit of the whole population. But as you know, as with any kind of rollout program, there will be a small percentage of people who don't want it, and that conversation to try and convince of the reasons why they should have it is definitely ongoing. But uptake's been really good.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Carol, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, just one small comment. It might be worth just mentioning the uptake of residents in care homes. Ed and Louise, I know Louise has got the information, because I think we've had a particularly successful percentage coverage of our most vulnerable residents. So I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that, Ed.
Yeah, so there are a few issues around the flow of data in terms of there's a little bit of a lag. So when people get vaccinated to when we then see that number on the system, there's a little bit of a lag. But the data I've got at the moment is definitely in the kind of low to mid 90%. And so if you then take a percentage of people that don't want the vaccination or are unable to have the vaccination, then, you know, I think it's fantastic coverage within care homes. Okay. The other thing that we're doing. The other thing that we're doing as well is primary care networks are having a kind of a 2-week rolling program with care homes as well, to make sure that, so if they've got new residents who, for example, have come out of hospital into a care home and haven't had a jab, every 2 weeks there'll be a check on care homes to make sure, you know, is there anybody else, 1 or 2 people that might need to be picked up. So that's going to be an ongoing check and balance in the system as well.
Okay, thanks for that. And Louise has basically added on a comment that she agrees with obviously everything you said there, and that goes for the staff in the care homes too. Okay, right, we're going to move on unless there's anything else. We're on to item 5 then, and it's just the normal standing item, Charles, in relation to any decisions that have been taken under emergency rules that we have in place for COVID, and is there anything that needs ratification? So over to you.
No, thanks, John. No, there isn't. This was something we put in place, which obviously we've kept since the beginning of the situation, but it's something that we haven't been required to use as of yet, but okay. Prudent to keep it there just in case. So.
Okay, we'll note that. Thank you. And then finally, Mark, we get to the chair and accountable officer report after my faux pas earlier on. So I'm going to hand over to yourself.
Thanks, John. Just a couple of things for me to highlight. Firstly, you will see, obviously, we made mention of Chris's sad passing in the report itself, and we've had our time to reflect. I think it was just worth also noting the fact that we've had a number of very, I think, helpful events with staff, with minute silences, etc. Staff coming together just to reflect on their time with Chris and their experiences and their stories about Chris, and I think and I hope staff have got some comfort from that. I think we have pretty comprehensively covered the vaccination scenario, but a couple of other bits in there. Firstly, some good news. The West Cumberland investment in phase 2 of the West Cumberland site, the £40 million capital bid that was signed off by NHS England. I think that's particularly welcome news. And will allow that work that started off with the first initial tranche of £90 million development to continue on. So I think in the world that we live in at the moment, it's nice to have some good news around that. Also, very well worth noting that the ICS now has a formal chair to the integrated care system, and that is Professor Sir Liam Donaldson. It is a name I'm sure that many of you will recognise. Sir Liam is former Chief Medical Officer, spent a lot of time working in the North East, has been spending a lot of time working with the World Health Organization, and we're delighted that he's been appointed to the role. I think his knowledge, grasp, depth of understanding, and not least his long list of contacts throughout the whole of the NHS world will be invaluable to us, and his leadership in terms of taking the ICS forward. So that's very welcome. On a related note, we also have made note about the fact that we now have more documentation in terms of the future of the NHS. You will remember that we received before Christmas the first paper from the NHS board about proposals for the future. That paper has been followed up with some following documentation, which is about the proposals that NHS England have made to government about the future direction of the NHS, and that indeed has been followed up by the publication of the white paper. As you can imagine, it has created a huge amount of discussion, and we are in the midst of understanding what that means for us, what that means for our place-based working, what that means for CCGs as organisations, and what that means in terms of ICSs becoming new organisations. I think it's particularly important that we recognise the fact that throughout that documentation there is a very clear thread about preserving the commissioning functions and commissioning roles in a new system, but we need to be very clear about how that works for us in North Cumbria and how that preserves everything that we've worked to put in place in terms of place-based working for North Cumbria, but also how it would work for an ICS that needs to cover 13 places. So there's a vast amount of depth and detail that now needs to be worked through, and we will keep you up to speed on that as we understand more. And the final thing was about the West Cumbria Community Forum. I just think it's really important to note that we still do have our community meetings, and they are very valuable to us, and will continue to be so. So even though we are going through these very trying times, those kinds of interfaces with our public and patients remain extremely important. And I'll stop there, John, if there's anything that you want to add.
No, nothing to add on that, Mark, but just open up for any comments. Deb?
Hi, thank you very much, Mark. I'm just going to ask about the West Cumberland Hospital development and how the population are sort of being involved in what will be in that and how their views are being reflected.
So if I'm honest, I don't have an answer to that at the moment, Deb. I think that what the trust has done is the trust have obviously gone through a process where they have had their discussions internally that is come together to formulate their business case. I think the first thing has been to get that business case through a path, and I'm sure that there will be plans now in order to be able to understand how we do the wider communications. And Charles has got his hand up. Charles might know a little bit more than I do, but certainly that would be our expectation.
Yeah, I think just under the way the current NHS work, clearly the responsibility for capital projects like this one actually lay with the trust rather than ourselves, although I am aware the trust are putting together a sort of reconstituted project board to oversee the project, and I believe we'll have a seat at that table. When you do these things for big capital developments, I don't mean this in a sort of derogatory way, but the national powers that be have a whole load of criteria that you've got to include, which will include engagement with the appropriate stakeholders as well as part of the process. And just to say, from what I know about it, and I've been asked to support the trust with, if you like, technical observations as they've been developing the business case from time to time, is a lot of this is about putting in place the sorts of services that we expected as a result of the Healthcare for the Future consultation. And actually, one of the things that I think is a good thing for North Cumbria and West Cumbria in particular is trying to, and we talked about it on the minutes of the previous meeting, trying to develop the West Cumberland Hospital as a centre for improved access to elective or planned care, because part of the trust case is that hopefully as a result of that and improving services, patients will choose to remain in North Cumbria, particularly for their orthopaedic operations, than perhaps go elsewhere. And picked this up at the Finance and Performance Committee yesterday. It does seem that there's quite a lot of, coupled with the new capital development, a bit of enthusiasm within the clinical teams as well to take that forward. So such things have to go through the public scrutiny as I say, to get there. But it's more of a trust process than ours.
Thanks
for that,
Charles. And I
Charles.
mean, it's really good to know that £40 million investment is coming into North Cumbria.
Yeah. I was going to say, Sue, you've got your hand up. I don't know if you want to add anything to that last comment in relation to the public involvement in the development of the hospital, because I know we had a presentation at the forum from Dean Oliver, who's a senior responsible officer now for the project. But you might want to add something to that, and also anything else that you wanted to ask as well. Go ahead, Sue.
Well, just to encourage a continued co-production approach around that, because we know members of the public are really interested in exactly what that is going to increase the provision of it on that side. But my comment was about something else, John. May I continue?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yep.
So I was going to join up two other things, really. So looking at the paragraph in your paper around the NHS, the white paper, I suppose my anxiety around this is that we make sure the focus is using this as an opportunity to increase patient outcomes and improve experience. And it's great to see that it's written there, but I know people worry about change of this sort as having a negative impact on those things, and a focus simply on the strategic approach. So I would, that's my first plea, is to not lose sight of how important that is, that, going through the massive change process should be staying focused on those things. And I think linking that to the next paragraph, which is about the role of the community forums in encouraging that debate, actually, and bringing the paper or the next iteration of it possibly to a future forum meeting would be useful, I think, to get people's views on how to secure that direction of travel.
Absolutely, Sue. And I did speak to Richard on that last point specifically about potentially coming to do a presentation once we knew what the situation was. Okay, so let's take that as a given, Sue.
Okay, thank you.
To be honest with you, yeah, no problem. Is there any other questions or comments from people before we move on? Okay, no, thank you very much. Then we're going to move on to the next item, which is Christine Harrison has come to present for approval the equality proposal in relation to ongoing work that you've been doing for a number of years now, Christine. So I'm going to hand over to you and take it as read that people have actually read the report and seen the information, but I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, thanks, John. Due to the coronavirus outbreak, the Equalities Commission reviewed the public sector equality duty specific reporting obligations and suspended reporting for 2020. What you need to bear in mind was that this initial proposal was for the November meeting. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to review the objectives and the strategy. But now, having said that, public bodies are now required to publish the information by the 30th of March this year. There's nothing to stop us publishing a draft strategy and objectives while we're working on them, which would give not only staff an opportunity to comment, but for local organisations representing those specific protected characteristics to comment as well. With the strategy that's been sent out, we added in the additional 8 actions for local systems that NHS England have asked for to tackle health inequalities for the COVID-19. So, like John said, I'm assuming you've read them, you've read it. I had drafted 2 equality objectives that link with the organisational objectives, but they are quite high level, and as the Equalities Commission suggests, they should be specific and measurable. So what we need to do is have a wider discussion within the CCG to make them that, and so that the organisation has a vested interest in them. The only other thing I wanted to say was, you may remember that in the past we've had various goes at joint working on equality issues, but when this paper was submitted, the joint working had stopped due to different people moving on and other priorities getting in the way. However, recently we've had the first meeting of an ICP-based group to look at equality, with another one scheduled for next week. It's early days, so I think that CCG still needs its own strategy and objectives in place at the minute, but hopefully in time we will finally get the joint strategy and objectives and reporting that we should have in North Cumbria.
Okay, are you okay, Christine? Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, thank you for that, Christine.
So just comments or questions from colleagues around the table. Deb?
Thanks very much, Christine. I just remembering a presentation that we received from somebody in CHOC, where they had taken the values and demonstrated how that they would be reflected in how you acted. And I just wondered if something like that as an appendix, so that it then went into all job descriptions, you know, that related to the skills, but it related to the 4 factors, the kindness, etc.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Chris. I was just going to say.
John, I think it has to be more. There has to be more of an organisational involvement in the equality strategy and things. At the minute, we tend to come to the governing body once a year or whatever, and I do the reports and the writing up, but there isn't. I'm not sure there's an organisational ownership of the equality process at the moment.
Thanks for that, Christine. I was just going to say as well, Deb, that we did used to have within those values linked to our objectives, there was a kind of framework in terms of what that would mean in terms of behaviours. I'm sure it exists somewhere. Whether every single thing was linked to equality, I'm not 100% certain, but there was a behaviour that said, if you do this, that's a positive. If you do this, that's a negative. So there was some work done by that. So it'd be interesting to see what CHOC have done. But I do accept Christine's point as well in terms of whilst this should be on everyone's agenda, and it's come to the fore really as well under COVID, it's been exacerbated in terms of where you do get some different inequalities, particularly obviously around different communities. So, okay, any other comments from anybody? Colin.
John? Yes.
Yeah, Colin, yeah.
Yes, this is an interesting balancing act between an obligation, a statutory report we make, and our aspirations as a health economy. And as Deb has pointed out, making it real within our workforces, our organisations and our services to patients. And I think Deb's obviously looking for that connect, and that connect requires a narrative, and that's what CHOC is basically doing. CHOC is saying this is woven into your employment, your training, and the way we work, because otherwise it doesn't work. So I want to thank Christine, because it's been, I think, for Christine a bit of a lonely sojourn, and some of these aspects are actually written within our statutory obligations, and it's been interesting to observe, and Charles and I have had a series of conversations on occasions about the huge number of statutory obligations we've been given, and what are we able to do in any one period of time. So what my hope has been, and it's pointed to by Christine actually choosing amongst the statement. I hope everybody's read this, but I want to talk about this, which was the issue about what NHS England expect us to do about health inequalities. John, you may remember that unfortunately just at the just before Christmas, I was due to come and make a presentation, and then unfortunately circumstances and so forth, that didn't happen. But there is a kind of aspiration through these NHS changes, which if people want to try and make a good narrative and have high hopes for them, is the very thing that Deb's talking about, and the very hope that Christine has, which is that it could be more than Christine doing this work, but that the whole system would do it, and that the very hope that Deb would have, that it would get real in teams and for communities and day-to-day interactions. And how could that be? Well, that will have to be through the empowering of PCNs and place-based working to actually know their populations well, interact in an integrated way with everybody, including the public, the communities, the third sector, the staff that are available, and the way that the hubs work, and the priorities they place to make progress year on year within a framework that no doubt the ICS will produce, and that any place-based organisation will invest in And what hopefully we'll be able to do over the next few years is, if you were sitting in a place-based issue and you said to them, what are your health inequalities priorities, they'd be able to go, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because of this, that, the other. And our projects this year are that, and that. And would it be perfect? No, but it would be good enough to start making incremental changes, and it would answer Christine's question about who's writing this report. Well, the answer to Christine would be everybody, and it would be an amalgam what everybody's doing, and it would end up being a kind of cut and paste, Christine, for whoever's coordinating the report. And it would answer Deb's question about how do we do this in our day-to-day issues, what are our values and such like. So to have that happen, to be quite blunt, it's something to do with what Mark was saying about how we make these health changes work for us here, how we make the structures real. Because if we come in with a top down, I can tell you right now, it'll be a car crash. So we will have to manage ensuring everybody believes that this is a bottom-up process, but within a structure that means something to everybody in their working days and for the communities that work for, and that works towards an aligned structure so that here in North Cumbria we are actually making progress year on year and learning from what we've done before. So hopefully that's not just going to be flannel, John, it's going to be the journey we're going to make. And if you said to me, well, what's your main worry? My main worry is that we're not mature enough in our ICC and our PCNs to carry the load so that Christine can get out of the writing the report each year by feeling that she's just doing it for everybody. And at the same time, not overburden the PCNs and the ICCs with an administrative top-down burden so that they get the ownership and they start to have those real conversations and we grow it from what people can do each year. So hopefully that makes some sort of sense.
No, it does make sense, Colin. And I think one of the challenges for us, of course, is, and we touched on the white paper, is for us as an organisation, which is part of what obviously Christine's trying to achieve there. As an organisation, we may not exist in this current format in potentially 14 months' time. So it's more about how that gets woven into the wider place-based working, which is what your point was as well, Colin. I was going to bring in Mandy, then Charles had his hand up. So you first, Mandy.
Yeah, I think Colin's really helped to us to all kind of understand a bit more as well about this. And as Colin was talking, some of this probably, Christine, links in with the work that Suzanne Harrison's doing around the people plan. So obviously she's doing some work locally, but she's in the ICP, but she's also linked in with the work in the ICS. So I wonder, Christine, whether it's worthwhile having a conversation with Suzanne about how some of this certainly will link in with that moving forward. I know that's helpful.
Good suggestion. Thanks very much, Mandy. Charles?
Thanks, John. It was just to sort of reinforce Colin's point that this isn't going to be an overnight job, but also that this isn't just an issue that that we're wrestling as a CCG. And I think the clear evidence behind that is Ed's point earlier on, in terms of the vaccine programme, when it's based on age, is quite objective. As soon as you put other factors in, depending on people's point of view and different evidence that probably contradicts itself, identifying how we address this agenda with lots of competing groups that will have claims that they're not getting a fair crack of the whip just shows it's a very difficult area to manage, and we shouldn't shy away from that. It's really appropriate that we do it, but I just think we need to acknowledge if it's going to work, it shouldn't just be a box ticking exercise. It's got to be something that we do properly, and it's going to take time to do that.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Ed?
Yeah, so with a great example in terms of how we can do some of this work operationally is Christine's work with the vaccination programme to do an equality impact assessment on the whole of the programme to look at, how likely is it from the rollout of the vaccination programme that we're likely to disadvantage any particular community for any particular background, And that's just been a really good kind of sense check in terms of, are we covering the bases just with this one programme? So I think impact assessments are really important.
Okay, thanks for that, Ed. Is there any other comments or questions before we move on to what we're actually asked to do? Are we all okay with that? And again, accepting, I think, and Christine's outlined this in her presentation, that it's not the finished article. There's work to do. The question is for us is, you know, we've got to get motoring on that. And again, I think there's probably something around this whole issue of equality, and not just health inequality, but equality generally, particularly around staff within our organisations. Maybe how we represent this at the ICP exec and leaders board as well, about what's happening. So I think there's a tie in there as well. So we can pick that up. But we are asked to actually review the strategy. You're going to circulate to CCG staff for further comments as well. I think Christine was one of yours. And then as an organisation, develop an action plan for the next 2 years to be included as Annex 1 in the equality strategy. That's basically what you've asked for on there. I mean, we are asked within that, it says for recommendation, but I think it's to give you a sort of approval to say, yes, we approve going down that line. Are we all okay with that? I'm not going to ask, because it's not a finished article. I'm not going to ask for like a proposal in a second. I just want to know that we've got the approval of the governing body to continue going on with that. Yeah. Okay. We're all. I've not seen anything to the contrary. So Christine, that gets you through that first part. And I think again, Mark, is maybe just at your exec group just to have some discussions there, and then I'll make sure we have some discussions in the wider ICP as well about how we link it to that. Is that okay? Is that okay, Christine, for yourself as well to?
Yeah, that's great. Progress? It was more about the process of it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
thanks very much for that. So we're just going to move on, and then we have now Louise. You're going to talk us through just receipt of the Cumbria Safeguarding Adults Board annual report, and I did see you had a very similar background to the report on behind you, so as a screensaver, so that's very appropriate. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, John. And I'll probably be very brief. It says for discussion on the agenda, but obviously we share this report for information. Obviously, it is delayed in the sense of it is a report until March 2020. And again, that will be to do with the impact of COVID on the ability of the partners to work in a business as usual way over the last sort of 12 months. So it's really obviously for colleagues here to note the work of the board, particularly in relation to the lead up to the start of the pandemic. And clearly in there as well is the contribution that the CCG have made as partners. And just to add to that, that obviously the partners have worked still in a business continuity phase throughout the whole really of the last 12 months. And like a lot of other areas are now starting to focus on priorities for the next 12 months and taking account the impact of COVID. So it's just really open to questions, John, on that basis, in case anybody's got any questions in relation to the document.
Okay, thanks very much, Louise. Are there any questions or comments from anybody? As I say, it's part of the normal process of us being in receipt of a report like this, the same as we do get one for safeguarding for children as well. But Carol, you did put your hand up there, so I'm unless that was like a half-hearted attempt or you're looking at something, go ahead.
I was looking at the actual electronic hand and I couldn't see it, so apologies for that. I just wanted to commend the report. I think that it's actually very well written and makes quite, you know, it's a difficult subject, but it actually makes a difficult subject educational and engaging, and being able to actually see how we're moving forward in Cumbria and how all the partners are working together. So it's a great example of multi-agency working. I think the whole safeguarding setup that we have, and the report I think demonstrates that. So yeah, you see some of these reports and they're quite hard to read. And I thought that was actually an excellent report, and I don't know if we can send that back. I mean,
I'm happy to feed that back, Carol. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to feed that back.
And thanks for the contribution from our CCG to make it an excellent report as well. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Carol and Louise. Is there anything from anybody else? Okay, we are asked to receive that report for information, which I think we have done. So appreciate you bringing that, Louise. So we're going to move on, item 9, and again, it's going to be yourself, Mandy, that's going to take us through this. It's a special education needs and disability update, and I think the report is self-explanatory because it's not the first time we've had a report like this here, just to keep us updated as to how the process is going. So I'm going to hand over to yourself.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. So for colleagues that have seen previous presentations on the SEND work, just to remind you that the original inspection in Cumbria by CQC and Ofsted was actually in March 2019. So this is a kind of progress report, really, that's been written by Greg Everett, supported by Sian Rees, who's the new project manager for the SEND programme in Cumbria. And I think really what we wanted to do is to bring this to governing body for an update, but also to talk, to maybe have some discussion as well about how we want to communicate this out to, you know, as we move forward. So in the executive summary, so strategic update, obviously there's COVID-19, like with a lot of programmes that we've talked about already today, the COVID-19 has had quite a big impact on the work of the teams. Having said that, I mean, I've been chairing one of the working groups around emotional health and wellbeing, and we've continued to maintain really good memberships of those working groups. And I think it's fair to say that particularly with the involvement of the parent carers in this work, they've really helped to kind of keep us focused despite the huge challenges of COVID. So just wanted to make, you know, put out a thank you there to all the providers, all the agencies, all the parent carers, third sector, everybody that's contributed to kind of keep that momentum going. I think that's been absolutely key. And I think, I mean, one of the big challenges for us was to make sure that senior leaders, like all of us sitting around the table here today, make sure that you fully understand the huge impact that these families and young people, the challenges that they're under on a 24/7 daily basis, and how, as health leaders and education leaders and social care leaders, how we need to keep striving to make improvements on how we support these families. So, like I say, huge progress has been made. There's in one section of the report on 3.1.2, it lists a whole range of things which we've been able to make progress on in the past year. So some really good news about the re-establishment of the Parent Carer Forum. There's been some really good improvement work done on the local offer, which is the website that professionals and parents and carers can turn to for information about what support is out there for them in Cumbria. Access times to CAMS in particular is one of the things that the inspectors were very concerned about, and pleased to report that there have been significant improvements in that area as well. But we've also again seen, I think senior leaders around the table do have now a much better understanding of some of the challenges, and that will continue to grow as we move forward. I suppose the only other thing I wanted to say really today, because I'm assuming that you've all read the paper and happy to take any questions on it, is that the inspectors are likely to be coming back to Cumbria for a revisit, probably from sometime April onwards this year. So Sian Rees, the project manager, is doing really some preparatory work to make sure that we're ready when the inspectors do return to Cumbria. So she's at the moment producing a self-evaluation of where we stand. I think at the moment it's something like a 30-page document, and it's continually growing. But it does mean that as partners, we'll all be in a much stronger position to be able to answer those questions that the inspectors raise with us when they come back to Cumbria this year.
Thanks very much for that, Mandy, and thanks for the people involved in preparing the report. Are any questions or comments that people want to bring up? Okay, I can't see it. Could I just ask Mandy? It's kind of like a general question. That if I was the parent or carer of a young person in this situation, do you think I would notice the difference now about how we engage with, approach, support a family and a young person through that? You think you could tangibly feel it? And I know the group that you've got set up there deals with those kind of things. I mean, are you getting some good positive feedback from that group about the efforts that have been made, or is it still a bit mixed?
I mean, certainly, obviously, the parent carers that are involved in the programme feel much better supported. There's no doubt about that. And they obviously now know who to turn to if they're having problems. And they're now able to start spreading that word out to other parents and carers that they support, which is great. And that's where the Parent Carer Forum really comes in, because the more, it's like a ripple effect, isn't it? The more people that know about what's available, the more we'll be able to reach out to those that don't always put their hands up to ask for help. And I think that's always going to be a challenge with these things, is that there are always going to be hard to reach families who don't go on the websites, don't go on Facebook, don't keep in touch with CCG web information or newsletters that are going out around Send. And so it's a constant challenge to keep reaching out and making sure that we capture that as much as possible. One thing I would say, one area that the improvement board was struggling with last time, and something that we need to work on better, is making sure that all frontline staff know about this improvement work as well. So it's all very well senior leaders knowing about it, but does your teacher in the classroom know about it? Does your GP at the front line know about it? And that's the piece of work that's ongoing now, is to start doing much more kind of communication and engagement with those frontline staff. So that's the next phase of the communication engagement moving forward.
Okay, I've seen Sue's hand up and then Charles's, so I'll deal with you first, Sue.
Thank you. Yeah, again, just doing some linking. I mean, in many ways for me, this is also about equality or equity. It's about addressing inequalities. And, you know, if we were getting all of those things right, then we wouldn't be seeing quite so many inequalities with this group of our population. And I think the question we need to ask ourselves, and it runs right through the Send work, is good enough good enough? And I think, you know, if you talk to some of the parents and families, their experience is that it isn't quite good enough. And I think, you know, that's the thing that we need to deal with. And so it comes right back to what I put in the chat, which is about reach, behaviours and respect. You know, this is a very important group of our citizens, and they're not getting the services that they deserve. And we need to find ways of making sure that that's addressed. And the improvement programme is only part of that, because my worry always is if we tick the boxes of an improvement programme, have we actually achieved a cultural change in how the needs of those people are being looked after? And so I think that's a more important question than just following the improvement programme requirements.
John, you're on mute.
Sorry. Just in terms of Health Watch and the wider People First organisation, do you get many kind of contacts around families, children who need supporting, and is that kind of a big area for you?
So I'm just separating out those two things.
Yes.
So from a People First perspective, obviously a large proportion of the work that People First is engaged in is supporting young people with learning difficulties, and actually supporting them into the world of work through the Hospitality Academy and the Centre for Learning. From a Health Watch perspective, we did a big project actually 2 or 3 years ago now, which was about exploring the experiences of young people with learning difficulties around a range of services actually, and we did it from the perspective of a wide range of you know, we did it from commissioners, providers, family carers, young people themselves. And the answer was that some of their basic needs weren't really being addressed. So we still do hear about that. And, you know, that's why I'm asking the question again, because that ran right through that piece of work. Is good enough good enough? And I think the answer is, as I've said, no.
Okay. Charles?
Thanks, John. I was just going to add to Mandy's point, because there's a really good video out of one of the meetings that was shared with staff. But I think the key that Mandy pointed out is without being in danger of stereotyping, a lot of the participants who typically get engaged in these sorts of events are either those families with very immediate problems, or those families that are quite attuned to the system or perhaps outside their roles as parents and carers, have perhaps a bit of a knowledge about how the way these things work. So the really tricky bit is engaging those families who don't traditionally engage in these sorts of things and make them aware, and perhaps who also don't always hold, if you like, the wider authorities in the greatest esteem. So anything that these groups can do to pass the message on using their contacts probably has more credibility than the official resources, and we should encourage that. But we just need to be aware that for a lot of these families, the effort and emotional toll on just dealing with their own family circumstances means their energy to do that is actually quite difficult to maintain. So it is a very big challenge, but certainly it's a bit like the equality and diversity issue we talked about earlier. It's trying to find a way to engage with those families who we don't typically engage with, because probably those who are first at the table tend to have other ways that they're aware of engaging anyway. It's just much better that there is a system and process rather than, as Mandy said, those who shout the loudest.
I think one thing to add into that is that they didn't realise that engagement was an area that had to be improved. So I think it was in October, we've actually had a new engagement lead who's a parent carer herself, who's made such a difference in such a short time scale. I think her appointment is for 1 year initially, but I think having somebody in that role has made such a difference. And the other thing to add in is that there's a lot of people out there at frontline that are actually doing a lot to support these families that we don't always hear about. So even if the improvement work hadn't started, I'm hearing some amazing stuff, particularly from teachers, from education, that are doing welfare checks on a weekly basis to make sure that these families are getting the help that they need. So I wouldn't say it's all kind of negative stuff. I know the inspectors found a lot of problems, but as per usual, when you start kind of lifting the lid and looking at what's really happening at frontline, you see some amazing stuff happening in Cumbria. I think the community spirit has really been heightened during this time.
Okay, thanks for that, Mandy. Denise?
Mandy, I just wondered who's funding the parent carer engagement post?
So I'm assuming, I wouldn't know the details, Charles might, but I'm assuming it's a joint venture between local authorities, CCG, and council and CCG. I'm assuming Charles, but he might know better than me.
I think that the lead organisation for this is Cumbria County Council, and it covers both ourselves. So it's not just the North Cumbria initiative; it's a whole Cumbria initiative, and we do make some contribution both in funding and kind, if you like, in terms of management time and things into the process. But it is Cumbria County Council, if you like, the lead funding body. But I can find out perhaps after the meeting what I think it's just more that
we support the extension of that post, because I know it's made a difference.
Okay, thanks for that, Denise.
Sorry,
go on, Mandy.
There was just one final thing as well. When you think about finance, Denise, I forgot to mention as well, and it is there on the report, is that one of the areas is that there's actually a group looking at commissioning. So we know that through all of this work over the past 2 years, there are gaps in current service or issues around capacity in some services which these families rely on to help them. So there is likely to be at some point in the near future a financial request that will come down to commissioners, but at the moment we don't know the extent of that. But it has been put in the paper that is something we'll need to keep our eye out for.
Okay, thanks for that, Mandy. Anything else before we just? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I note that there's basically 2 recommendations in the actual report, Mandy. One is that we note the update primarily, and obviously there has been an impact with COVID. And then the second one, which is probably more specific for us, is that the governing body restate the continued priority and sustained commitment of North Cumbria's CCG to this programme of work across the partnership. Now, that's an easy thing to say, and I think you've just touched on a couple of issues that actually then start to make that become a reality in terms of what we do. But we're not being asked for anything specific at the moment as regards additional contributions or support or funding or anything like that, is what I'm led to believe, Mandy. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be or that we should be. I'm just saying we've not been asked for it in this report. So I don't think you're going to get anybody saying any differently other than we support the continued priority and sustained commitment. But I think what you're saying is there may well be some occasions where either something will go back to the exec in terms of delegated responsibility around commissioning, or something in a wider field around support that maybe need to be offered. But at the moment, that's not the case. Is that correct, Mandy?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, if anybody's interested in, I mean, Charles did mention the video. I'm not sure I think we did send it around to governing body, but if anybody hasn't seen it and would like to see the videos between the senior leaders and the parent carers, then just let myself or Julie Clayton know, and we can make sure that you get those.
Okay, that'll be very useful.
Well worth a watch.
Oh no, thank you for that, Mandy. I mean, again, I know Paul's on the meeting. Whether or not we can actually put them on the website, if they are available for public viewing, which I presume they are, then we could put it on there as well to make it more accessible for people, if that's acceptable.
John.
Yeah, okay. Is that going to be okay, Mandy, in terms of that? Is it a publicly accessible video, or is it specifically for internal consumption?
Who's the person to ask? Probably Harry Harrison's maybe the one to ask to double check.
All right.
I would just say, John, we should double check that from an information governance point of view.
Exactly. So that's fine. If Paul, if you can check with Harry, or Louise, you've made a comment. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So, just to sort of add and reinforce that, as a CCG, we do have duties in relation to SEND. I think probably colleagues are aware of that, but I think it's just worth referencing that in the fact that we must work with the local authority and obviously in terms of participating with the joint commissioning arrangement. So it is a duty on the CCG to sort of obviously pick up those things, John. I just thought it'd be worth referencing. Thank you.
Very worthwhile referencing that. That's thanks for that, Louise. Appreciate that. Okay. Are you okay, Mandy? I think we're all accepting those recommendations at the moment on the basis that I'm not going to say any more than that. Are you okay? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't know whether you want to think, John, about when you want another update. I mean, obviously, if we're going to be having an inspection again in April, we'll have a better idea on progress, probably maybe say 6 months or something for another update. That would be
okay. Yeah, Carol, you've got your hand up, literally. Go on. Yeah, sorry, Carol, you've done what I did before.
Sorry, I double clicked. I just want to thank Mandy for the update, and also just to Louise. The QOC normally receives more regular updates on SEND as the kind of the subcommittee of the board to oversee that programme. And I'm just wondering, Louise, if we should put SEND, Louise and Mandy, if we put SEND on the agenda for March, because if we have got this inspection in April, I think the QOC will probably want to assure ourselves that we are ready for it. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, that's no problem, Carol. We can do that.
Thank you.
And I think as well, Mandy, if there is an inspection, for us to be aware, and also if there is something that you need to brief us on prior to any kind of inspection, is always useful as well. But I'll leave that with you, because obviously, if we don't hear for another 6 months, the inspection might have been and gone by then. So more than happy to engage at any level, I think, from a governing body perspective around any of those things that we might be asked to do. You okay? Yeah. Oh, I'll take it. You're on mute, but I'll take you that was all right. Right, we're going to move on now. There's a few items here. They're down for information. I think probably the one that Mark will speak to first. The rest say equality, performance and finance. Got good hearings, I think, yesterday at the relevant committees as well. But we're not going to not have any discussion about them. But I'll go to you first, Mark, for just this oversight in relation to the CQC report for the North Cumbria Integrated Care Trust and the process that you've put in place. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, John. So board members will remember that the Care Quality Commission issued their report, or their latest report on North Cumbria Integrated Care at the end of November. And since that time, as you would expect, we've been working with the Trust to think about a suitable assurance process to monitor their responses and seek assurances that we can then bring back to governing body and assure ourselves through our various operational processes. What we wanted to do was to make sure that we had a very clear understanding in terms of the progress that the Trust had made in terms of the CQC action plan, noting that we were and still are in a very difficult position in terms of the challenges of COVID. Nevertheless, we needed to make sure, and the Trust had already started to do work in terms of an action plan. We wanted to make sure that we considered with the Trust what internal processes and structures that they would have in place to support the delivery of the action plan, which gives us another level of assurance, and also to understand the meetings that we would want to have established and or reinstated that would allow us to have both formal assurance that we can bring back to the board, but also make sure that we on a week by week, month by month basis are working with the Trust and are aware of the progress that is taking place. We met on the 20th of January, the CCG and the Trust, and I chaired that meeting in order to go through those issues, and I think it was a very positive meeting. We had a very clear update from Anna Stabler, the executive nurse, on where the Trust had got to in terms of their action planning, but also the progress that they had already started to make. And we agreed that there would be a number of specific places where we would have the discussions about progress, the action plans, etc., and to seek those levels of assurance. The first is in the North Cumbria Integrated Care Quality Board, which is currently chaired by Margaret Kitching, who is the Chief Nurse for NHS England Improvement for the NEY area, North Eastern Yorkshire. The original remit of that board is to give oversight to the improvements in patient safety and quality in the Trust, but part and parcel of that agenda going forward will be this CQC action plan, and those discussions with Margaret have already started. The CCG, we will also seek continued assurance by attending the Trust Quality and Improvement Programme Group. And then another layer will be our reinstatement of the regular contract and performance meetings between the CCG and the Trust. And as you may remember, those meetings in general terms were put on hold due to the pandemic and in line with national guidance. What we also spoke about in a good degree of depth and detail was a joint clinical meeting attended by executive lead clinicians from both the CCG, and that's Louise and Colin from our perspective, and from the Trust for Anna and Rod. And this meeting in particular was about being able to focus and hone down on those key clinical issues. I think this meeting is particularly important because we had the discussion in the context of the CQC report, but actually this meeting has and will have a much wider context in terms of a wide range of key clinical issues that we want to focus on, working with colleagues in the Trust and indeed across the system as we go forward and we move hopefully out of COVID crisis and thinking about some of the things that we then want to focus on in terms of the rest of the system. If there are partnership issues that need to be progressed, then we will consider those at the Integrated Care Partnership Executive Group, and I think that is very important. And of course, we do have John, chair of our governing CCG body, attending the monthly Trust Board meetings where the action plans are updated and updates are received. And also, we had a very positive conversation with the Trust about representation at future governing bodies, and Anna Stabler agreed that she would be very happy to attend future governing bodies to provide updates and assurance as required. So in terms of the process, I think that we've got something which is robust there and gives us not only an opportunity to be able to make sure that we receive the right levels of assurance for the CCG and also for ourselves at governing body, but also to be able to take forward those operational issues on a longer term basis. I'll stop there, John, if I can, and just come to Louise to see if there's anything that Louise wants to add to that.
Okay. Louise?
Yep. Thanks, Mark. And I suppose, again, just for colleagues' benefit, so we've now had what we did ask on the quality board was a standing agenda item for the CCG, and that's now been recognised. So it's just a minor point, but I think important in terms of tying together the CCG's link into the quality process. And we reflected yesterday at our internal quality committee as well about how that connection clearly needs to be made, as Carol would reflect upwards and downwards into that committee as well from a quality point of view. So again, just endorsing the links between us from that point of view. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Louise. Mark, anything else you want to add, or should I just open it out to comments or questions?
No, I don't think so. Thanks, Joe.
Okay. So just for members of the governing body, I mean, as Mark alluded to, this is to try and give us that framework of assurance, and so we can understand exactly where those levels are and what's happening in relation to the report. So I'll just open that up for questions or comments. Okay, Carol.
Thank you, Mark and Louise. I really appreciate the time that's gone into giving us this assurance, and I think we've got that multi-layered approach with the trust that's required at both operational and strategic level. And you know, as chair of the QOC, I commit to being part of that, as Louise has outlined. I also particularly welcome the support that Anna will give in terms of joining future governing body meetings. Since the pandemic started, we have seen a lack of attendance, dare I say, and I think that's quite understandable to some extent because the trust are very much focused on caring for patients. But you know, given where we are with the recovery going forward, and also the CQC report, I think that needs to change, and we do need that high level attendance from our local community and key provider. So I do hope that Anna is able to bridge that gap. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Deb?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, thank you very much, Mark. I think it's a very good plan to keep track of what's happening and ensure that we are assured.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody? No. I mean, what we are actually asked to do, of course, is because Mark's already put this forward as a proposal stroke agreement with the trust. We were just asked to ratify this if we're comfortable with it. And also, again, I think part of it was for Mark to outline what the process was. So we've got something there that we use as a framework. And I think, Mark, you've achieved that. So thank you both to you and Louise for that. So are we happy just to ratify that? Yeah, I'm not going to ask for a proposal second. I just ratify, no agreement, disagreement. Thank you. Well done all. That's good. So the next one is, I'll let you introduce it, Louise, as to why it's verbal, but I think once you've explained it, we'll totally understand. But you're going to take us through the quality update, item 11, please.
Yeah. So so thanks, Chair. So obviously, usually you would expect a report into this committee. I think we've already touched on some of the significant pressures that we've experienced as a system over the last 6 to 8 weeks. That has particularly impacted in relation to the nursing and quality team. And as that has meant that in terms of the report writing processes, and in relation to the proportionate ask from NHS England around quality processes, that we had a verbal meeting, an exception meeting yesterday of the Quality and Outcomes Committee, and agreed in advance with Carol and obviously with John that due to the pressures in the system and particularly on the team, that it would be a verbal update today. Is that okay, John? Yeah.
Absolutely fine. Sorry, Louise.
So, as I say, I can reflect that yesterday we did, for quite an intensive hour, I'm sure Carol will reflect at the end, provide quite significant assurance verbally to the group. So all I'm going to do now is literally just highlight a few points in relation to that. And clearly, in terms of the March Quality and Outcomes Committee, will be a substantial meeting with quite detailed reports covering this period as well. So, as has already been reflected, that there is an improving picture in the health and social care economy, but the impact of that still will clearly be felt in terms of, we've talked about the recovery and restart from a quality and safety perspective. So Mark has already very kindly covered the CQC arrangements. One of the other key areas of focus over this period has been around discharges to support the pressures in both the acute and community beds. And again, as with other services, we've had to seek mutual aid, and there has been some what we call novel arrangements to be able to support the trust from that point of view. So I think the key thing to note, therefore, is that there has been a range of discharges in terms of short-term arrangements, both in and out of county. And part of the work that the nursing and quality team are doing now are a review of those from a safety and quality point of view, again, to provide assurance in respect of those new arrangements. Finance and performance, obviously you did touch on the healthcare performance I think yesterday, and it is in the document later on, but again I want to particularly note the work of our IPC nurse has been integral over these last few weeks in terms of supporting the care homes, not just around infection prevention, but also supporting Ed and his team in relation to care home vaccinations as well. The other thing I want to reference, again from a CCG point of view, has been in relation to continuing healthcare. This has quite a significant impact, and whilst in wave one there was a national stand down from a CHC point of view, that didn't happen. But technically, from a CCG point of view in relation to Next colleagues as well, we were very much in business continuity. And the reason for that is the staff from the CHC team, both in Next and the CCG, being deployed to support either in the care sector or into the discharge teams. And the feedback has been extremely positive, not just about the flexibility, but about the really, really positive contribution that they've been able to bring. The impact, however, is on our ability to support the business as usual continuing healthcare, and clearly will need to be a focus in terms of our recovery and restart. I think the final point I just again want to share with colleagues today is from a maternity point of view. So I think before Christmas, everybody was aware, both in the national press and locally, there was the publication of the Ockenden report, and there was a timescale around some immediate actions and a self-assessment that needed to be submitted by all trusts, and that was by the 15th of February. So again, you'll have a detailed update on that in the next quality report. But again, what I can assure the board today is that that submission did happen from the trust. Another requirement that it was shared with their board, and again that happened on the 28th of January. And with my LMS SRO hat on, it was also shared with the Better Births board, and some quite positive developments noted. So again, we'll be part of the oversight and monitoring from that point of view. So the only thing I want to reference, I will come to Carol if she wants to add any points, but just sort of reinforce our approach in terms of aligning both the quality and the performance reporting, so that we can give a more sort of integrated approach to that going forward, and our intention to work towards that from April onwards. So Carol, before I ask for any questions, I don't know if there's anything that you would want to add from yesterday or today. Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. I think that's a very good summary. We couldn't really reiterate the whole hour of the meeting, but I think you've picked out the pertinent points. So I don't have anything else to add. It may well be that Colin or Mandy, who were also at the meeting, would like maybe to add anything further.
Colin or Mandy, do you want to add anything specifically from the meeting before I bring Charles in?
I don't think so. No, thanks very much. I think Colin may have had to go on another meeting. So,
he did. Sorry, he did mention that yesterday, actually. So I think he probably left about 2 o'clock. Sorry, Brenda. I should have maybe raised that. Yeah, Colin was due to go sadly somewhere else, where he had to go and attend another meeting. Right. Okay. I've got yourself, Charles, and then yourself, Denise.
Yeah, it was just a very minor point, just to add to what Louise was saying about the maternity and the Ockenden Action Plan, just to say that that was shared, if you like, internally at the system executive this morning for all the organisations working in the North Cumbria Integrated Care Partnership. So it's just that has been shared. So I just thought I would add that.
Okay, thank you for that, Charles. Denise?
Mine's just a comment, and thanks to Louise, really. She kept saying, reassure, we'll get a more written report, a more detailed report. I think she gave a significant amount of reassurance yesterday and ran this amazing meeting that was 1 hour long and covered what she could have taken 3 hours over. It was really well done, and I certainly felt very reassured. It was really nice to see the IPC nurse as well, because I got a lot of confidence in her potential ability there. It's good.
Okay,
sorry,
thanks.
I forget her name. Well, I don't know her name, sorry.
Debbie, it's Debbie McKenna.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
Denise. I'll feed that back.
Thanks for that, Denise. And just related to Ockenden and those implementation recommendations, Louise, we maybe need a chat just from my view of the joint committee chair over in the northeast of North Cumbria. I heard there was something that you wanted to present there as well with a colleague about the wider ICS perspective. So we'll maybe just have a quick chat about that offline at another time. Yeah, but I'll arrange that. That's fine. Okay. So thank you for that. Is there anything else before we move on? No. Right. Okay. Accepting the situation as it was, it's highly unusual to do it like that, but there's obviously a real reason as why it was done. So I'm going to move now on to sort of performance report and finance report. We'll do them one by one, Charles, because you did lead us through these yesterday, probably let's say less than 24 hours ago. So I'm going to hand over to you, Charles, in terms of what you want to say about these.
Oh, thanks very much, John. And I was struck actually looking at the papers for today, because we have been looking at both performance and finance internally through the Finance and Performance Committee over the last few months, but obviously not in a meeting that's been held in public. So just to endorse, first of all, what Louise mentioned about we spotted before Christmas we needed to make sure the quality and performance agenda was more aligned, but for the reasons that we've just gone through, we're thinking we've clocked it, but realistically in terms of capacity, the start of the new financial year would be a sensible place to start. I guess in line with what's been said at the meeting, and this was the discussion really yesterday, is so for January, North Cumbria Integrated Care Trust was at Opal level 4, which means it's an incident of the highest order that it's had to deal with. We've heard about the issues, particularly in terms of hospital occupancy and the very stretched situation of intensive care over that period, the need for mutual aid. So understandably, a lot of the focus has been on that, and therefore a lot of the routine activity that contributes to the performance standards hasn't been taken over, and one thing hasn't been undertaken. And one thing that I am conscious of is we've been monitoring that internally through our processes, but as I say, that's perhaps not been as clear because we've not had the meetings in public. So I think really my focus is in looking at what we're going to do to address these things, and I think we are starting to see some green shoots of recovery, as it were. I mentioned yesterday, if we look at the ambulance handovers, that tend to be, for me, a useful barometer about how busy and pressurised the hospital systems are. Over January, that was a very pressured system, but the week ending last Sunday, the 14th of February, on both sites, the average turnover period for someone arriving in an ambulance was less than the 30-minute standard on both sites, and indeed the Cumberland Infirmary position, that tends to be the more pressured, was better than the average for Greater Manchester. So we are starting to see issues there. Some areas performance seems good. We've got to remember, probably in terms of constitutional standards, in terms of the ambulance response programme, North Cumbria actually has one of the best outcomes across NWAS. It tends to only be the red one, which is more down to geography, where we struggle to meet, which is a very different position. And as you see on the category 4, the standard sadly was missed in Cumbria in November by 2 minutes, but it was 1 hour 50 minutes for the rest of NWAS. So I think that's important, just remember that. In terms of the hospital, and particularly planned care, we are starting to see the hospital gear itself up for that recovery. We've talked about in the financial plans and things like the System Leadership Board. The Trust has set aside funds to start that off. It is hoping at mid-March to start things going. There are some positives behind that. The Trust has been able to get national capital to improve its diagnostic activity, because I think we all have to remember, while this is a national issue, the Trust before COVID had some pressures on elective care. So if we can improve things at the diagnostic end with the new CT scanners, which there were problems with the reliability of the older ones, so new kit should improve the throughput. We've heard the endoscopy suite, that's been re-equipped. A lot of the issues to do with infection prevention and control and the ventilation in there has been addressed. That's allowed more people to be seen. That's allowed added to weekend working. We've had feedback that I've done a bit of investigation since yesterday's meeting, that the Northern Cancer Network has identified that in terms of diagnostic activity, actually North Cumbria, the numbers it's seen are one of the best in the ICS. So they are starting to do things. I think the other bit that we need to remember on elective care, despite what I've just said, it is a massive issue for all of the country. Our understanding is that in the comprehensive spending review that was undertaken before Christmas, the Chancellor identified additional resources for the NHS, and a significant portion of those was very much intended to address this. We're looking to see both ourselves and the Trust to ensure that where we are able to take account of some of the national independent sector contracts that have been let, we can. Obviously, geographical proximity to a lot of those providers can make that more difficult. But if people are able to travel to get the treatment, that's got to be a positive. Again, not all the standards and performance issues are about the secondary care sector and North Cumbria Integrated Care Trust. Having said that, some of the issues looking at dementia prescribing, that's had to go on the back burner because a lot of our medicines optimization team have been supporting the vaccination programme, but it's something we need to come back to. And in terms of what Mark was mentioning earlier about the sort of suspension of contracting arrangements, what we have done is started to get some regular senior catch-ups with our counterparts in CNTW sort of get that ball rolling, because when we come on to the finance report, unfortunately, we don't know a lot about the next financial year, but what we are pretty certain of is the mental health investment standards will still be there, and we're working with CNTW to look at what are the pressures in the system, what are the issues about access, and how that funding, when it is confirmed, can be used in the right way. So we hit the ground running. So what I would suggest to everyone is, perhaps rather than focus retrospectively, in which has probably been the most pressurised month ever experienced for health services in North Cumbria, certainly in the well, it's actually this month 22 years I've been working here. We need to look forward, and what matters is about how we start to put things into improvement mode. The other thing, again, just to add to what Louise has just said, on some of the infection, the C. difficile figures out of hospital do look quite high. There is a multidisciplinary team in place trying to investigate the source of that and the actions to be taken. But again, there's been a capacity issue in terms of the time staff have had to look at that. So that's the sort of overview, if that's okay, John, and happy to take questions.
That's fine, Charles. No, absolutely fine. Any questions or comments from anybody? I know a number of people were obviously at the meeting yesterday. I was just going to add one more thing, Charles, is that you kindly agreed to support for the next finance and performance, just a more in-depth look at as you're talking going forward about the elective plan and the return, and also as well in relation to cancer, because obviously the committee did note that actually of all the areas, particularly the cancer was probably the one we're most concerned about, that baby hadn't done as well as we'd hoped it to do through the particular difficult times. We understand why, but that was the concern.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we got to. I don't know if there's anything from anybody else. Louise.
Yeah, and just to reinforce from a cancer point of view, obviously the nursing and quality team were already undertaking a piece of work looking around incidents and complaints, and already in the discussions between Colin and myself and Rod and Anna have raised the focus that we need around cancer as one of our key areas of focus. So just to add to that from a cancer perspective, John. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Louise. Useful. I'm going to move on if there's not anything from anybody else. Okay, I'll shift on. Item 13 then, Charles, just the finance report.
Thanks, John. And again, I'll be hopefully relatively brief, because with this, we haven't had, again, the finances, if it were, in the public arena directly as a governing body meeting, although we did actually cover them at the Integrated Care Partnership Leaders Board in public, both our position and the trusts. But it's perhaps just worth starting at the beginning for completeness. So when we met in November, we reported that, if you like, this year we've been working under I call it a special COVID financial regime, and for the first half of the year it was working, the system worked on a sort of retrospective top up of the costs you've incurred, providing you could demonstrate that you'd been sensible and proportionate and reasonable in your approach. I think when we met in November, we were hopeful we'd get all our costs covered, but we hadn't had it confirmed. Subsequently, we have had that position. So for the first 6 months, we've got a break-even position. In ourselves and North Cumbria Integrated Care Trust put together a plan for North Cumbria that was submitted for the last part of the year. Owing certainly from a CCG perspective, a lot of the underlying issue related to the technicalities of the process, I would suggest, rather than bad management, although you could argue I would say that, but nevertheless, I found ourselves in a situation where the resources that we were allocated under the COVID rules weren't sufficient to cover our projected expenditure. What's happened from October, November, December and January is basically our costs have been very much in line with that plan. We've had a few ups and downs, but generally that's been the case. We've also had the money on the hospital discharge programme, which Louise alluded to earlier in terms of continuing healthcare, refunded, but we carry on. We have raised with our colleagues at NHS England in the context of the national situation, and I guess further complicated by what might happen in the future. What happens if we have this deficit or shortfall, if you like, in the current year? What impact does that have on the future? Because we understand that overall, both the North East and North Cumbria is likely to break even, which suggests other parties may actually have a surplus, and again the same with the wider NHS. So we have raised that, and I guess we're just keeping a watching brief, and we're in regular contact with our NHS England colleagues. I think perhaps more pertinent is actually the arrangements for next year. So in previous years, we'd be bringing our first iteration of the financial plan and an update of what we'd done on our contracts with healthcare providers, etc., with the intention that in March we'd get the plan submission complete and all signed off. Well, as you'll see from the end of the cover sheet in the report, owing to all the issues that we've been discussing earlier in the meeting, the NHS planning process has been delayed. So the intention is that for months April, May and June, there will be, I suppose, a rollover of these current COVID financial arrangements, and then a move to some sort of more regular planning, potentially from Q2. Although the guidance says things like at least for Q1 we'll have the COVID returns. We're doing some work in the background as the ICS, just to start getting ourselves in a position that we can work on that. So we're not don't have a standing start, but the position is still currently quite unclear. The one area that we have had a little bit of clarity on, as I say, is the hospital discharge programme. So at the moment, anyone who is discharged from hospital and goes into a care setting will get their care covered through the National Hospital Discharge Programme for the first 6 weeks, and then the patients need to be assessed whether they qualify for continuing healthcare, NHS funded nursing care, and indeed if that's not the case, what their position is regarding the package of support they may be entitled to from the local authority. And one of the big concerns everywhere is that process has been put in place this year, rightly so, to try and support the flow of people out of the hospitals. We know that anyone discharged up to the 31st of March will continue to have their care funded from this programme for 6 weeks. What we're not quite certain of yet is what happens on the 1st of April. Our hope is this will be, it's difficult to do a more of a sort of phased approach out of these arrangements, which hopefully if things continue to go as they are from a hospital perspective, then they won't be needed, although we still need to be cautiously optimistic about that, rather than a sort of cliff edge approach where it's clear what happens on the 31st of March and we go into perhaps a more confused state on the 1st of April. Because I think one of the things that has helped everybody work together during the COVID crisis has been these national funding rules that have meant, to some extent, some of the perhaps what one might call euphemistically as system tensions have not been there, because there's not a bun fight about who pays. So we need to keep a close eye on that. That was probably all I was going to say. And actually, I was going to say one other thing. Sorry, just to say as well, is that there's a national system in place as well to support the funding of primary care networks to undertake the vaccinations. We are doing our best to support our PCNs in providing the information they need to submit into those, because for a national programme, again, how can I put it? It does seem to have a very low level of materiality in terms of the backing information that PCNs are expected to provide on what are drops in the ocean in terms of the overall NHS coffers. But so we're doing everything we can as a finance and primary care team to take the workload off the PCN, so they can concentrate, rightly so, on delivering the vaccinations.
Okay, Charles, thanks very much for that. Any questions or comments? And again, I know we spoke about this at length yesterday as well. Are we okay? Yeah, I mean, we accept it's a difficult year for various reasons, and obviously financially, whilst some things are being covered, I think it's probably the end of the year where we'll understand a little bit more about what's going on. Okay, right. Well, I was going to move on then. So on to item 14 and 15 in relation to minutes of other meetings that we receive here. So I was just going to go through each particular minutes for the exec committee and just ask the relevant chair if there's anything they want to pull out of those. So I'm with the exec committee, Mark. You've got one set of minutes there. Is there anything you wanted to pull out on there that you want to raise, people? Bear in mind it's 3 or 4 months ago anyway, so
not particularly.
I think things have moved on. Yeah. Finance and performance is myself. The only thing I wanted to mention, just in terms of the minutes, was on the 21st of October, there was a number of HR policies which were approved, which were actually obviously useful background for us to make sure that we're compliant, that they've been reviewed by next for us. And then on the 18th of November, I just want to pull out the fact that we did our self-assessment for the emergency preparedness, resilience and response, which showed us in a good state of order in terms of that. Outcomes and Quality Assurance Committee, anything from yourself, Carol, for your minutes that you wanted to pull out or not?
No, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Primary Care Committee, for those ones in August and November, I've got nothing to pull out of those. Okay, right. So we're happy to accept those, yes? Okay. Move on to item 15, which are minutes from the wider system. The Cumbria Health and Wellbeing Board on the 4th of September. There was nothing I wanted to raise there. The Northern CCG Committee on the 12th of November. The only thing I wanted to raise there was that there was an update on the work plan, which again probably had stalled, I have to say, in relation to what was going on with COVID, but at least you've got some recognition of where we're up to on that. And then on the ICP Leadership Board, again, which I chair, the November minutes, it just to point out again, there was a development presentation for ICCs, which we found very useful. And also as well, I just wanted to outline there was the approval of the ICP governance framework there as well. So there were 2 documents that certainly we've seen the second document, and I think people are aware of the ICC development. So I'll move on to item 16, which is questions from the members of the public. And I know we have 2. If Eileen's still here, I'm sorry, Eileen, that I cut you off earlier on in your questions about vaccinations and PCNs. I'm going to start with yourself, Eileen. If there's anything that you wanted to raise at all or ask questions on the items that have been covered on the agenda, and I'll try and direct it to the most appropriate person. Are you there? Or have you?
I'm mute. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Sorry, yeah. I know I cut you off earlier on, but this was the opportunity to raise those questions. Okay.
My apologies for popping in too early. It's a long time since I've attended one of these.
forgotten.
Don't worry. If you tell us who you are and where you're from as well, it might give us a bit of background, so we can understand where your perspective is.
Turner. I spent quite a few years on West Cumbrian's Voice for Health Chair, healthcare. I'm now chair of the Seascale and Bootle patient participation group.
Okay, thanks for that. That's useful.
One thing I do as part of the PPG job is over the last few months trying to get trusted information out into our community, usually using social media. Facebook seems to be very popular around here. So communications is my bag. Sorry, I'm a bit breathless. I've just run up the stairs.
It's okay. Have I caught you on the hop there, Eileen? Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I think that the presentation on vaccination was good, was really, really good news there. In our community, there's a lot of confusion because everything seemed to change suddenly last Friday. People are, well, I won't go into all the different stories that are going around, but there is confusion. So I know everybody's busy. I emailed Julie. She's not around, I don't think. Really good time to think of some communications on where people are going for vaccinations, why it's changed, like efficiency, protecting the GP surgeries from, so that they can do the day-to-day job, whatever it is. And what you can publish, I understand if you can't publish it all, but what is known about the way forward. That would be really helpful to me because I then have a trusted source rather than my ideas of what's going out in order to get it out to, well, people from as far as Milham up to Seascale is what I concentrate on. I do wider when it's appropriate, but so that's the end. Sorry for being so breathless.
No, Eileen, that's absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us as well, because I think what you're trying to do is absolutely commendable. We really appreciate it. So yeah, in terms of that trusted source, then I'm gonna open up to yourself again, Ed, really, to maybe to turn to that and then maybe advise Eileen on some other sources of information as well, which I know we have on our website.
I think what would be really useful, Eileen, I'm very happy to kind of catch up with you after this meeting as well, and maybe we'll catch up with Paul Day whilst Julie's off from comms, and just so that we can probably tailor something for you really in terms of exactly what you need for your local population.
Yeah.
So very happy. Sorry.
Go ahead, Eileen. He's asking.
It's not just for my local population. I can wander around. I'm quite comfortable wandering around the internet and getting all the sources. And I worked in communications for 30 years, so I'm fairly comfortable with that.
Okay.
What I want is the story to go out to all of North Cumbria, where they're going, why some people think this has been taken off their surgeries. That creates unhappiness in more than one way. So just a nice, clear story. This is what we're doing now. Isn't it great? These are the reasons we're doing it. And whatever you can of what you said earlier of the future's looking reasonable, that there are going to be more vaccines. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very happy to add. I know that our comms team do work a lot on putting messages out, but I'll make sure that there's more detail on particularly on our CCG website and things that are going out just to give a fuller picture.
Yeah.
And I think just while I'm talking, in terms of the changes of last week, were based on the national the national booking system.
I've seized up.
Have we lost her?
I am up again. Okay. Sorry about that. It was I'm out in the country. What do you expect?
Don't worry. No. So last week, it was decided that people from cohort 5, so the 65 and overs, would be called into mass sites. So everybody received a letter from the national booking system. Now, obviously in North Cumbria, we don't yet have a mass vaccination site. So those people would have been directed to probably the mass sites over in the northeast or in South Cumbria, Ulverston and Kendal. And obviously that has caused a lot of confusion nationally and particularly locally where we haven't got a mass site. So we have taken the decision locally to make sure that GPs continue to call in people so that they don't just have that one option of going to a mass site. But if they wish still to go to a mass site, then they can, but they're going to have to travel because that's how it is at the moment. But if they wait to be called, then their GPs will still contact them. So that was a bit of a national comms issue that affected people in North Cumbria last week.
Okay. Perhaps we should have a chat later, because that's not the story as I understand it.
Very happy to do that, Eileen. Very happy to do that.
Eileen, just in terms of making that connection then, are you able to put your email address on or something that on the chat? Or I don't want you to expose it because the chat could be seen elsewhere, or how do you want to do that?
I can send you my phone and email, telephone and email address.
Okay.
Is that easy to you, John?
Have you got my address? If you've got mine, I don't need to tell it you. Just send it to me and I'll send it on to Ded. As long as you've got an address. Yeah. Sorry, Brenda. Brenda, you're waving your hand.
I was just going to say, if you want to send it to brenda.thomas@northcumbriaccg.nhs.uk, my address is on the website on the governing body page.
All right, that's good.
Did you get that? Did you get that though, Eileen? In terms of
no, I just got to look at it on the website. It was a bit.
Right.
Can I just? This is Liz here. I can give Eileen probably the right addresses.
Oh,
all right. Okay. Thanks for that. So, sorry about that. Okay. So was that your only questions, Eileen? Yeah.
Yes, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Liz. I was going to say, if you get any questions, but I just see before I go any further, I think based on the question that's maybe been raised, Sue, you put your hand up first, and then Denise, and then I'll come to you, Liz, as a specific question.
Well, no, I've got a comment on that one too.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll do Liz. I'll do Sue first, and then Denise, then yourself, Liz, if that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just really going to support Eileen, really, in terms of the potential for confusion amongst our members of the community. We hear it all the time, and I think there's something around the national messaging that people hear on radio, and then the local implementation and the misfit between the two. And I'm not surprised people are confused, especially when it actually means, so what do I do today? And I think listening to Eileen and working between Julie and Ed will be very, very helpful, just because it's as much about what are the myths that are out there and how do you address them so that they no longer become myths, because the myths become truths. And then that's what leads to dissatisfaction. And I think the more that Eileen and Liz can help with that, the better, because they're living in those areas and know and understand where those myths are. So completely support that.
Thanks, Sue. Denise?
Yeah, Eileen, it was just to say, I don't know if you heard earlier, I'm going to talk to Julie when she's back, because she's only on annual leave for a few days, about getting some messaging around people getting worried that once the second vaccinations come in, people who haven't got the first are going to get left behind. So we'll pick all that as well, you've said.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liz, your comment, and then maybe a question if you've got one.
My comment is, well, there are a couple of things. I mean, I went for my vaccination and then came home to a letter from a national letter saying I can book a vaccination, which seemed to me a waste of paper, time, effort, etc. My husband had exactly the same experience. What's happening where we are is that people are going down to Kendal, which of course is out of the North Cumbria bit. That's one issue. The other issue is actually the transport. If people think they've got to go to these bigger centres, they are going to get concerned about how they get there. And there are quite a lot of issues there, which I know have been identified as issues, but I haven't heard anything being done about it or anybody being offered means of transport, whatever. To go from where I live to Kendal by public transport is impossible. And that's the nearest centre. So there's a lot of issues that haven't been talked about.
John, you're on mute.
John, you're on mute.
Oh, there you go. So sorry, Liz. I was just going to say, I think Charles has got his hand up, but I say at the moment it's the nearest mass vaccination centre.
Well,
but there's work doing. Yeah, it's still annoying.
Well,
Charles.
Penrith would be even worse.
Well, just
Charles.
I think a couple of things. So to just reinforce what Ed has said, people don't need to go to those places. They will be able to get their vaccination locally. And I would appreciate what everyone said, the national sort of one size fits all versus what we're actually doing does have a contradiction. The other thing is just to say we've actually, as a CCG, given a grant to the Cumbria Community Foundation to actually support people who don't have access to transport in actually getting transport for vaccinations. The idea is we've got an agreement with the foundation, who will then look to appropriate providers, I guess, in the voluntary sector to provide transport. It might not sort things out for everyone, but we've done it as a start to see how it goes. So it has just one of the reasons why, and you can apply this for sort of most COVID things. It's taken a bit of time to sort out. Is what we've got to do is make sure anyone who is providing this service has the appropriate infection control functions in, because the worst thing we could do is end up with a load of people getting COVID because of poor on the way to get vaccines, if you see what I mean. It would so that's one of the things we've got to get right. So that was signed off, I think, last week. So that's all right. Okay. That's
So thank you for that, Charles, because I'm involved with the community transport community. So, and we know about putting the right things in place, and of course taxis and so on. They're much better at it. I mean, it has been worrying me. Random neighbours, stroke volunteers who don't understand about vaccine control, about infection control, taking people for their vaccinations, and that has been going on.
Okay. I was just going to say, Charles, where would Liz get information on that? Would it be on the Cumbria Community Transport website, or is that what it is? Yeah. You've got the contacts, Liz, yeah? You're okay with that?
I know who I can ask.
Okay, no, that's no problem. Was there anything else from yourself, Liz, before
John, sorry, John, could I just say, after you've made that contact, Liz, I'd be grateful if you could just give us a bit of feedback, just to see what you think as well. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. Anything else, Liz, before I wrap up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you both, yourself and Eileen, for attending and B, asking your questions and making it very, very interactive as well in terms of trying to get some feedback. No, it's really useful because I think some of that feedback was excellent for us as well.
The other bit of feedback is that the Flats Walk experience was really good. We had in our group people who've been to the hospital, people who've been to Flats Walk, and people who've been to the local surgery. And actually, Flats Walk was the one that actually was the best experience.
Okay, no, thanks for that. That's useful, Liz. And again, Ed's just put a comment on there specifically for some of the things that you asked, Eileen, and that there's a lot of information on the CCG website under COVID-19 vaccination information. So you've got that.
We look at that.
Okay, that's fine. I was going to move off this then. I'm going to any other urgent items of business. I do have one, actually. And it was just to say to people that at yesterday's Finance and Performance Committee meeting, we had the presentation of the health and safety strategy for us as a CCG. Part of the responsibility, and it was a little bit unclear, but part of the responsibility of the governing body rather than the Finance and Performance Committee was to oversee and review that strategy, although it wasn't 100% clear. But what I wanted to say to colleagues was I know that strategy has been through the exec. It went through Finance and Performance yesterday in terms of us looking at it from a, say, particularly lay member perspective. And I just wanted to say, are we happy, for just a note down in this item, that we're happy to ratify the health and safety strategy as it's probably been presented to both exec and to Finance and Performance, for us as a governing body to know that on the minutes. That's all I wanted to try and do. Is that okay with everybody? You've probably all seen it anyway. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. The next one is just in terms of the date and time of the next meeting. As I said at the start of the meeting, because this one was out of sync, our next meeting is in a month's time to getting us back into where we were. That will commence, and it will be on a virtual meeting again. That'll commence at 1 o'clock on a screen near you. So I just want to say a very big thank you to everybody for today's part one. Just for the benefits of the members of the public or those members who are not sort of members of part two governing body, is that there is a part two. We'll start that now. I make it 15:11. I'm going to give us a little bit of a break until 15:20, if that's okay. That's not quite 10 minutes, but it's 9 minutes. It should be enough to get a break and a bit of a brew. And then we'll start again. And then thanks very much, Liz. And obviously as well to Eileen and to yourself, Sue, as well, in terms of your attendance here today. So appreciate that, and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.